Welcome back to the unnamed interview discussion conversation series that
The thing that shall be named
the
later
thing that shall
after
be
it's already
named.
started.
Yes.
It's very
Yes.
appropriate for what
Yeah.
we do.
We said something at the end of it last time, which was simple wisdom. I kind of liked that, but it seemed a little bit haughty, so I decided I wanted to come up with something a little more fun.
We wouldn't want to be haughty.
Yeah. Simple wisdom.
Welcome
This
to
is just
Simple
the
Wisdom.
truth. Yeah. And it's
This
really not even
is
about like trying to give wisdom, because that's not really what I think we're doing here. I think we're more the like it's like we're like explorers of the philosophic world. I feel like it's like we're going on like mind adventures. That's good. More what it feels like.
that's there's even a topic right there, which is different from the topic that I'm planning on bringing in, but wisdom.
Nice.
Uh, because I'm a huge fan of like the idea of wisdom, and I think of it as a path.
Mhm.
Like as I'm thinking about it right now, as much as I like getting like a nice soundbite, like the Facebook posts and just like conclusions and the aha moments, it's there's a process to inquiring more and more, to like zooming out and getting a bigger, like embracing paradox, zooming out, exploring topics, having a loose mindset
Mhm.
is what brings us to more and more wisdom. It's really more of a path rather than something where you arrive. It's like, okay, finally, now I know the truth.
Right.
I
Yeah.
figured it out.
Was there a point in your life where because I feel like there was definitely a shift, and I think it was around, well, maybe around the same time I discovered Ken Wilber, but it was this like point where I was like, oh, like there isn't truth. Like there's like, I really thought I was gonna get there someday, and then I was like, oh shit, yeah, that's never gonna happen. Like it's just, and then you realize there's just these perspectives that it's like there's not, you end the debate between doing and being and shit, where you're like, okay, I guess they're both valid, and it's like this kind of moment where I feel like it's sort of like the death of my 20-something-year-old, something. I don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm totally cool with like continuing to run with this because this is awesome.
Yeah. Well,
Topic.
so I want to say first, for people who maybe just are tuning into this, how we're structuring this is one of us is coming in blind to what we're talking about, and the other person is bringing up a subject that is fascinating to them and that they want to dive into.
Yeah, and this is like double blind. You said something that I wanted to work on.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Well, I'll just hand it back over to you and see where you take things.
Yeah, so I want to go with wisdom
Okay.
because it's alive. And yeah, you mentioned Ken Wilber. It's like my path. And one of the things like that I want to presence for like how I learned how to like unlearn basically. One of the perhaps the most influential book in my life, which I fortunately got exposed to really early in my life, like in my teens, was the Tao Te Ching,
Mm-hmm.
specifically Stephen Mitchell's translation. So it's really cool later on to realize that he's married to Byron Katie and to
Right.
see them
Nice.
together. It's like, dude, like you wrote the most influential book in my life.
That's
Well,
awesome.
he translated.
Yeah.
But that was my first foray into wisdom, as I think of it now, was the Tao Te Ching, cultivating paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just this book that's filled with things that sound like opposites,
Mm-hmm.
saying how they sort of dance with each other, that they're actually the same thing, that they're like two aspects of the same thing, the yin and yang.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. You got that age, man. I think I would have been even weirder if I got a hold of that stuff when I was like 13. Like I would have had no friends. Like I would have just been like even more off into like the loner space. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's all, I don't need friends. I don't need girlfriends. I can just it's all the same, man. Just beliefs or whatever. Yeah. But,
yeah, and I'm not sure like it became seminal. I'm not sure how it actually affected me back then. It's something I can trace back to now. It's like, oh, okay, that's where I originally got that. That's where I got the habit of like someone will say something with such certainty,
mm-hmm.
like this is true, which I like instinctively from a doubting type of place, like, what would the opposite of that be? How
Nice.
is that also true?
Yeah.
and then embracing that, how can we see a bigger picture where like both of these things sort of like interact and are true at the same time? Basically, I was starting to do Byron Katie's The Work as an example of this. It's like
Yeah.
a distinct structure for how to do that.
Hmm.
But I sort of was learning how to do that maybe like 20 years before I discovered The Work,
Hmm. Hmm.
just by reading the Tao Te Ching over and over and over again. It's one of those things that was just like by my bedside.
I'm gonna have to check that one out. I really haven't. I haven't read it. I mean, I think Paula had Wayne Dyer's translation of it or his little book about it
Ooh.
hanging around the house, and I browsed through it, but I haven't really looked at it much. So
I think you'll
no, you'll
enjoy
like it.
it.
It's good.
Because, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to say something on the practical application of this wisdom of opposites because, you know, after I realized, okay, so there's no ultimate truth that everybody can strive for to make their life better. It's just a question of perspectives, and then there's usually, like these opposites with two perspectives. I tried. I looked at it from my life, and I said, all right, well, how do I then operate? Like having known these perspectives, how can I operate and how can I think about things in a way that's actually going to make my life better? Um, and one of the things I came up with is, and I haven't really, I don't know how to really put this. It's just sort of like I explain it different ways every time, but it's just this concept of like which way should I lean?
Mhm.
And so basically, if I, so this is something that's been up for me lately. I realized that I've been in the last couple of years, I've been um, uh, with women in our community. I've been like kind of making myself more like super super safe and friendly, and I'm like slowly like putting my like sexual seducer side in a box somewhere. Whereas when I was single before I met Paula, it was just out, and that was what I was doing. And so I realized like a couple of days ago, like, oh, like I'm kind of acting a certain way. Um, Hold on, notifications going off. I'm acting a certain way because, you know, um, I'm sort of I don't want her to feel any sort of trauma from me. Like I don't. I want her to feel. I don't want. I don't want to get in any poly trauma. So I'm just like I'm being like super duper safe, but it resulted in me being kind of repressed sexually. Um, and so I decided, all right, now it's time for me to lean back toward like sexual deviant, or
Mhm.
it's lean into that. And I find people once they get that there's these two ways, there's two truths. I think it's a question of asking yourself where on that spectrum do you tend to fall, and then how can you lean back toward the middle? Does that kind of make sense? Have you thought about that at all in that way?
Yeah. I have like a visual aspect I'm sort of leaning into. When it's thought of as a polarity,
Mm-hmm.
it's like either you're over here or you're over here. And it's like there's there's like a linear spectrum between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Then it becomes the very definition of a dilemma. It's like, okay,
You're
well,
gonna take me into three dimensions, dude.
yeah, maybe four, but first let's start by adding a third.
Okay.
Actually, really, it's rather than dimensions, it's moving you from Newtonian to quantum.
Oh shit, man. Good thing I had some coffee before this.
Because if you think of it, it's like, okay, I'm either over here or I'm over here. It's like when you're quantum, you realize that you're in both places at the same time.
Okay, I can dig that.
That's where it's like the yin and yang. It's like you notice how there's that little bit of yin in the yang, the little bit of yang in the yin within
Yep.
the symbol.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's getting more of that. Like another way to look at this is zooming out. Like you're both.
Mm-hmm.
How can you be both rather than it being a question of, well, should I be on a scale of 1 to 10, how much for like sexual, like outward sexual should I be?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, should I be like a 3? Should I be a 7 with the right balance?
Well, it's like I
uh,
want to amp up where I'm at because I found that where I'm at was left of center, and I want to be more to the right in a sense.
mm-hmm.
If we're assuming that the balance, like in the right in the middle, is a perfect balance, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
that's also kind of an assumption, but
Yeah, but it's not static.
yeah.
um, it's more like music.
And then there's also like if I'm just spending all the time thinking about that and judging it, or that's I'm not really, I'm kind of on the sidelines of that too.
Yeah, then you're gonna be like either you can be over here and ashamed or over here and ashamed.
Yeah,
It's like here you're doing it wrong, here you're doing it wrong. You're just doing it wrong in different ways.
yeah.
It's like either you're repressing yourself or you're like causing trouble.
I guess it's like for me, I just think about where do I, if I have a certain amount of awareness that I can use up during the day, where is it worth spending it, you know? And if I notice that I have these habits of like, that aren't helping me, then I try to spend my awareness money, to like, to be more aware of that kind of stuff. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Kind of,
Awareness lands for me. I think that's a good third dimension to add.
yeah.
It's like instead of worrying so much about where on the spectrum you are, how much consciousness are you bringing to what you're doing?
Yeah. Here's a good example. Okay, so when I first started coaching, I realized I didn't listen much. I'm really good at talking a lot, but I'm not really good at listening. So I had a whiteboard, and I just would write, and I'd sit there with conversations, and I'd write listen, and I just that would always be a reminder for me to talk less and listen more. Now that's not true for everybody. Some people need to like speak up and go on rants if they feel it and express themselves. I just don't have that problem, and so it was good for me to lean that way, to always take the advice of listen more, for me, because I noticed through feedback and through some really good coaching and that I didn't listen. And so once I had that breakthrough, I was like, oh, okay, now I can adjust for that. That's that's a much better way of saying what I was trying to
Okay,
point to.
cool. That lands like more for me and differently. It's
Because I
like
think if you
it's the
didn't, yeah,
practice.
I think that practice can only come after you're aware of the fact that there are these opposites. There are people who listen too much and people who don't listen enough, and then there's a balance of it somehow.
Yeah, and realizing that you're on the side of like not listening enough.
Right. And I didn't know
It's a
that
course correction.
because before somebody gave me that feedback, I just assumed that I'm in the middle, because that's if we don't get good reflections, we just end up assuming that we're in the middle. That's just
Yeah,
how it goes.
we assume that our like regular experience of reality is normal.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And once we realize it's not even like realizing that it's not normal as much as like we see something that's more who we want to choose to be, for example, listening more.
Hmm.
And in order to actually make that our center of gravity, we certainly need to like tag on some training wheels in order to like get us going that direction.
Yeah.
It's like we need to exercise, we need to practice, we need to start doing something. We need to like consciously apply some willpower
Yeah.
to get what we do instinctively to match up with who we want to be.
Yeah. And I think it's cool too, because I always notice that it comes like the strengths and weaknesses come together. So I might realize, as I did with the coaching, that like I don't listen that much, and I could take people deeper if I listened more and just shut up. But I also saw, wow, like I'm also really good at these kind of, like I basically, for some coaching calls, it would just be like a personal audio for somebody. Like and I noticed too that it's like, for example, one time I talked to Steve Chandler, and he talked almost the whole time, but it was insanely useful. It just happened to be that that's the medicine that was there that day, and I saw that for myself, where I was like, okay, so this may not be perfect. I don't want to be like another coach, but this is useful in its own right. But maybe I'm more geared to giving speeches than I am coaching people one-on-one.
Yeah.
And then so I started to think, okay, how can I use this strength that also comes with the weakness, but how can I play to my strengths more? And that's why I stopped coaching.
Yeah. Once you realize that you were just talking the whole time, and it didn't really matter if they were still on the phone or not.
I was like, I could be talking to one person or 1,000 people, and it's the same thing. So why don't I just?
I didn't really need their input. I just want to talk, so
Right.
I'll record it and send it out to people.
Right, exactly. Or I'll just do it in front of a room and then record it and put it on a podcast or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's that third dimension. It's like it's not as like oh yeah, there's because there's two things. There's like one is like what's the best thing for you? Like where's your zone of genius and where can you like lean into that more? Like if you just want to talk,
Hmm.
then yeah, like go with it if that's your zone of genius. But then sometimes there's also like, okay, what are the undeveloped parts? What are the parts that if you did that, you might actually enjoy it, but
Hmm.
you just haven't been doing that much yet?
Yeah.
And how do you tell the difference?
Hmm.
And that's the third dimension of awareness.
Well, certainly learning to listen more has vastly improved my being. I mean, it's really helped. I don't know that I'm there yet, but definitely, it's balanced me out in a nice way that I at least have more than one gear now. Like I can shift gears if I really need to. It's just not
Hmm.
my it's just not my default mode.
Yeah. So it's not just like, oh yeah. So one is, I think of two important questions to guide people in similar quandaries. Like I noticed that I'm really good at this, I'm not good at this. Does that mean that I should only do this? Or does this mean that I should really work on this? It's like that very common question. And both require like adding more awareness, more consciousness. So one is like from experience, figuring out like which one is more your zone of genius, which is where's the place that you actually want to be, independent of like what feels easy or
Hmm.
what you have a lot of experience with. That's one. And the other, which I keep on forgetting, is yeah, how much of a choice do you have between the spaces?
Hmm.
If you wanted to listen more, do you have choice around listening more? Do you have like the capacity to make yourself do that? If you're sort of trapped in just one, even if it's totally like your gift and it's the thing that you want to do the most of,
Yeah.
it's still limiting yourself.
Yeah.
If you love to talk, but you also have the full capacity to pause and like really listen in to when someone's going through something or saying something,
Yeah.
that's even more powerful.
Yeah.
So you can pick both your center of gravity. You can have both breadth and depth at the
Yeah.
same time, is
Yeah.
what I would want people to cultivate.
Hmm. I think what happens too when you only have one, like when you're like a one hit wonder guy, have one thing that you do really well, is then it becomes your identity. And then you have to kind of face this question: who would I be without this? And that's a very depressing question usually when you actually face it, because it's just
Yeah.
like that's who you are. It's like so you're clinging to it because without that you would be nothing,
Yeah.
but not
It's
in
like
like
if
the
you
good
lost
Taoist way. Nothing, bad way.
the bad,
The bad nothing.
depressed, nothing, the bad nothing, not the
Yeah,
good nothing.
yeah,
If you lost your superpowers, would you still be okay?
yeah, yeah. I love that question. I mean, I've had that come up so many times in my life about like, okay, at the time when let's say I was identifying as a coach and I was able to, weave these cool conversations and help people, and it generated so much purpose and meaning out of that. And then like who would I be, if I wasn't a coach? Well, that would then have to walk into a party and not try to coach everybody. Well, that would be like a relief. But like there was this kind of like, I can see how that is where I'm like garnering my self-esteem from in a lot of ways. And I did that as a musician for many years. Like I mean, it's so tempting when you're a teenager and in your 20s that all you have to do is pull out a guitar, play, and sing a song, and everybody's going to love you. Like, how do you not use that and then get attached to it? And then, as a musician, it was just like, oh, like I used that and then I got attached to it. And,
Yeah.
it was, not, it was different. Yeah. So,
Yeah, there's like a real gift whenever you somehow forced or choose to move away from one of those.
yeah.
I, I suspect that people who have made major changes in direction in their life, like the more often they've done that out of like real choice, actually, no, whether or not there's like much choice, but with some consciousness, the more often they've done that, probably the more okay with themselves they feel.
Mm.
Because it's the people who had like a talent from birth, who had like one great thing that they were good at, um, there's also a clinging to that. It can be great if they succeed and their entire life becomes around that, but if they fail at that thing, then they flare out, or at least, or there's the opportunity for them to change directions.
Sure.
There's that trap of thinking that we're all destined for like one great thing, and then we think we find that thing and we pursue it for years. Maybe we succeed wildly, maybe we fail or it's difficult, but it's like sooner or later we change
Hmm.
and there's something new.
Yeah.
I think the more often we can go through that process, the more we realize that it's like, oh, like it's not my superpowers that make me a perfect human being.
Yeah. Or
I'm just,
lovable, or worth
yeah,
anything. Yeah. Totally.
deserving of love, or like
Yeah.
okay, or like that actually it's like, no matter what the circumstances, I'll still be okay.
Hmm.
And like that inside out
Yeah.
orientation.
Yeah. I don't know if I told you this story, but it's one of my favorites, and it's also related to our camp at Burning Man, so you'd appreciate it. But this was like the moment I let go of my music identity for sure, and I really haven't. I mean, music, the identity of me as a musician is not doesn't have the kind of grip on me that it used to. Now it's more like as a writer and other shit. But um, so it was 2012, and at Camp Contact in Burning Man, and I had just met Paula, and so I was in this blissed out, falling in love state, and it was the Tuesday night. I don't know if you remember it, or Thursday night. Thursday night at Camp Contact, there's like we invite people over for dinner, and then the people will sit around and play music, right?
Hmm.
And so the year before, I had done that, and I'd played, and it was great, and everybody loved me, and I got all that, like, hey, Dave,
Yeah,
oh my
hey
God, you're
Dave,
so good, yeah,
you're popular.
yeah, I'm
You have
popular,
validation. You
exactly,
feel
yeah,
good.
yeah. So, um, and then, and I had just been, I mean, I've been pretty much doing that since sophomore year of high school. Like I had just been collecting on that. Like that was like a stock that was just kept going up, and the returns were just coming and coming and coming. Ego returns, and so it was just sort of like one of those things where like when there's an opportunity to play music, I play music. Everybody loves me, and that's it. It was just a given. And as it just met Paula, and we were sitting up on top of the trailer, and watching. It was like near sunset. We were just watching, looking over the playa, and I remember just feeling it was like I was the most at peace I think I had ever been. It was just this incredible sense of bliss. We weren't on drugs yet, and it, I don't know what it was. It was just like kind of those like Satori moments, or it was just really really good. And I remember Brooking, our friend, came up and was like walked up the trailer. She said, "Hey Dave, they're gonna set up the guitar stuff. Are you gonna play tonight?" And my first instinct was like, "Well, yeah, of course." But then I was just in such a nice, slow state where I was just like, do I really want to play right now? And actually, I'm really enjoying sitting here. I don't want to leave. Like, this is it. I'm loving this. I'm sitting here with Paula, and just
Hmm.
life just can't get any better right now. I don't want to go down there. And then I looked down there, and I saw that there was a girl from our camp who um, I had known, found out through conversation, and, was like kind of a budding musician, like, had some songs, really was excited about sharing it. I saw her kind of running around setting up stuff, she was excited. And I knew that, if I went in and played, might outshadow her a little bit, and I didn't, and so I was just thinking about that, and I was like, okay. And I sort of, and I realized, no, I don't really want to do it. So I said, Brooking, I was like, probably not. And that was like shocking to me that I just like turned down this opportunity. It's almost like somebody
It's
handing
like,
you like $10,000 and you're like, I'm
nah.
good, actually. I can't find any use for that. And so this conversation went on in my head, and it was like, there was this voice after I said no. There was this voice that was like, well, how are people going to know how awesome you are? Like, it was a legitimate question. I was like, huh? Because here I was passing up this opportunity. Oh, now they're just regular old Dave, and then I just then listened, and I thought, and I waited, and the answer came back was, they're not. And it fucking blew my mind. I mean, I swear to God, I just turned to Paula, and I was like, and I told her the whole thing, and I was like, this is amazing. And she was like, all right, but I was like, oh my God, like that's it. Like it wasn't then I could insert something else so I could be awesome. It was just like, they won't know. And that's okay. It was so fucking cool, man. It was just this like, it was really just it was this like moment of total like just
Mhm.
explosions in the sky. Wonderful. But yeah, that was my Burning Man story. I thought you'd appreciate it since it happened at our camp too. And it's crazy.
Mhm.
It's crazy. Like to actually go like to be without that. Like I could just be me, and maybe it'll be my little secret how awesome I am. And that's okay. And it was really cool. That was kind of that was the beginning, the end of my like real like attachment to a music identity. And of course, I went on to other identities after that. So
Hmm.
you know,
I I love that. I'm still savoring that.
nice. They won't. Holy, they won't know how awesome I am, and that's okay.
Uh-huh.
Wow, that was fucking crazy, man.
And I like the idea of just sort of you know how awesome you are.
Yeah,
Um,
and it
and I
feels so.
some
There's like you get like these humble rewards. There's like it's like, oh yeah, like the I'm. And it's almost like Paolo and I have talked about this within our relationship because there's times we go like, wow, this is so amazing. Like our relationship and the moments we're sharing are so incredible, and yet there's no way anybody else could appreciate this. We just can't share it. Like there's no people. No one's going to ever know the magic that happens between us. And I think every couple can feel this way. And so it's like, but then there was a kind of like, oh well, they really will never know. They really will. No one will really ever know how amazing we are. You are. I am. It's just never gonna happen, and that's
Mhm.
kind of okay, in a cool way. And I was like, huh, yeah,
And what's really fun, because I think I've done, compared to many, compared to most, like a good job of like getting in touch with loving myself and
hmm,
seeing how awesome I am to a level.
yeah,
Just walking into a new space, like walking in any situation, or most situations, I should say, still have dips. Walking into a situation just like with that self love, with that knowledge, just like walking around, just like knowing that it's a secret how awesome I am,
hmm, yeah,
with like zero attachment to anyone around me getting it.
yeah,
It's like I don't need to like transmit it. I don't need to like prove it or like even
hmm,
like show it. I
yeah,
just feel like walk around knowing it
yeah,
is so much fun.
yeah. It's great. Yeah, yeah,
And coincidentally, from that place is the thing where like that's that thing where people will just like approach you. It's just like, who are you?
right. Yeah, yeah. It's a wonderful, and it's such a contrast to how most people I think are in most places, anyways, where um, they're wearing their achievements on their sleeve somehow, or they're wearing they're putting their best identity foot forward. And this is kind of the opposite. It's like, I'm gonna, you know, it's like the billionaire in the hoodie, it's kind of thing. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, totally. Hmm.
Yeah, it's sort of like how can you be totally full of yourself without it being like egoic?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that just for me, it's like that. It's this constant. I mean, feedback and reflections are so like it's just that's absolutely essential because, if every time I was able to transcend that identity that I was holding on to, it was because I really somebody pointed that out to me. They're like,
Mhm.
"Well, like, you're kind of full of yourself, man." Like, you're like or whatever. Or like, Paula would really she did this for me around coaching. She asked me once. She's like, who'd you be if you weren't coaching? If you weren't a coach, like, and I was like, oh fuck, man, I don't know. It was like, and I don't know that I would ever. I mean, seeing that stuff without the reflections of other people is very difficult.
Yeah, it has me wonder. It's like, can we make this even more real? Like, in what way are we still trying to portray something?
it's always like my mind just is like always on to the next thing. It's always like, you know, um, like whatever my new project is, or my new. There's always this like, kind of new identities I want to step into, and then I'm kind of, I'm seeing that that's, for example, if I decided I'm going to be a speaker, and that's going to be my thing, and then now that's that I start like cultivating that identity, like it's somehow like that's going to help me with it, and then someday, and then it's just like someday I'll get there but not even realize it, and then it'll be like, oh, I am a speaker and I'm doing that stuff, but I still like, I'm just like living this identity, like it, because I tried to like, I don't know, at some point I thought that would help in me becoming a better speaker and doing more speaking. It's just to be the identity of it too, or something. Yeah. So.
So that's something like, you're talking about consciously doing that, or where it just sort of happens?
Well, I noticed that I care more. I'm more attached to the newer identities than I am the older identities.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a point in my life where I was attached to being a musician. Now I could care less. Like people could be like,
Yeah.
dude, you're not very good. Yeah, I'm not. Whatever. I don't care. Like it's not like it, But if people were like maybe attacked my writer identity, I'd be more defensive about it.
Yeah.
But maybe it's just you're with something long enough and you've kind of squeezed the juice out of it or something.
Yeah.
Or you
Well,
maybe seen that it's not all that.
identity changes.
Yeah.
It's like, what if you were no longer a writer and you're now a speaker
Right.
who happens to still be writing a lot?
Yeah. 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 And hopefully with every change, it gets there's a loosening of the whole thing as a just identity thing in general.
Yeah, and hopefully with each, I think usually when like the next identity feels more in flow, like it's like, oh, this feels more true, like so much so that I'm actually able to let go of an old identity. Like my transition, which is very gradual, from being a developer to a coach, the more of a natural progression that is. I think also like the more that's integrating everything that you've done before. Like the identity might sound distinct, like being a writer sounds pretty distinct. It's like, okay, that has this and this and this, but that includes all sorts of things from the like, music career, from everything, from coaching, from everything that came before. It's like that's all in there still.
Mm-hmm.
So like even though it might have a nice distinct title, though, and it might be a title like sort of pointing the way towards like where you're inspired to grow, you're still like even more you than you were a year ago.
Mm-hmm. I get that. Yeah, it's like a accumulation of something. Yeah.
Yeah.
How does this tie into or relate to the sort of original idea you had about wisdom? I'm almost like curious, like what you actually had in mind, because then I'm like, I'm just curious. Like,
I think I should keep it secret because I
yeah.
might bring it back in another conversation.
Well, I don't
That
know.
topic that shall not be named.
I was just like, oh, that was. I'm curious what you were really kind of stewing on, but
Hmm.
just throwing that out there.
Yeah. Um, I just love the idea of wisdom, especially paradox.
What does wisdom really mean to you?
Um, a couple things. When you just asked that question, what came to mind is that being able to listen to like an inner voice of wisdom, like what's really true rather than what's reactive. That thing that seems to like know more than the rest of me knows.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like tapping into that deeper wisdom kind of intelligence, which is something beneath the feelings, beneath the emotions. It's where something can feel right. Or I might even just like get a message like, oh, I should do this, or oh, I should go here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun experiment at Burning Man, just for like listening to that voice, like, what should I do next?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently I should go to Cinder Camp. Don't want to.
Yeah.
but it said I should, so I'm gonna go.
So it sounds like your wisdom has more of an intuitive flavor to it. Is that kind of
Yeah,
maybe the? I mean, who knows where the center is, right, in the spectrum of what people think wisdom is? But it sounds, at least to me, like I sense, it's intuitive for you.
that's one kind of wisdom, intuitive wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Another kind of wisdom, this is the kind of wisdom I think about like my little posts or when I'm like writing or teaching, is just usually just answering a difficult to understand question, like a difficult to answer question. How can I take this idea and this idea and find something that encapsulates both of them?
Mm-hmm.
And that was my original impulse when you mentioned wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
taking opposites and sort of like having a worldview where everything makes sense. It's like, oh, okay, got it,
Yeah.
cool. Now I can operate from that worldview
Yeah. That's.
without
I think that
confusion.
that's kind of where I fall with wisdom too. I really tie in wisdom with life experience a lot. So it's like I think of someone let's like a classic like someone who's old, who's who's very wise. Well, and they've lived all these different flavors of life where they're like they've been a they've maybe been a millionaire on Wall Street, and then they've been a hippie in Hawaii, and then they went and were an artist in Paris, and they've done all these different things, and then they can look at life in a more holistic way, and so there's wisdom there because of the time spent living these activities. And that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I think, what you're saying, because you couldn't actually have those perspectives unless you'd been in the territory of them, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the biggest skills to develop. Um, well, I think there are two good ways to develop a lot of that wisdom. One is just having like a wide variety of life experience, and that might be the most fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just try all sorts of different things. Try the things that are like try something that's the opposite of what you just did. If you're super intellectual, then do something super physical. If you're really into solitude, do something that involves like thousands of people. If you're really into people, try like going off on a silent retreat with yourself for a week.
This is like my leaning thing. This is exactly what I really, this is like, I really believe this is a way that I feel like I live and try to encourage others to live. Like, I think this is really important.
Yeah, and it's like it's fun and it's accessible
Like if you're
to
bald,
just
like
like
wear a wig for a week or something,
yeah.
like,
It's like
have you
I
ever
look
done that? Like, have you ever considered just like throwing a wig on for like not like a real, not like a really good one, but just like something, $100 or something and just
I've
like,
tried a variety of wigs at like usually at parties and Burning Man. There's sometimes where people ask me, "Is that my real hair?" Which is like
nice.
one of the best compliments for me. It's like, yeah, that's totally my real hair.
Yeah, that's funny.
Because for some reason this seems to work with multiple wigs.
Yeah, no, you got great hair for wigs. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
What was the other question? What was the
Oh, we're
real
talking about
question?
you were talking about I added that it was kind of like
Leaning.
leaning, and then you were saying if you're an introvert, go hang out with a lot of people. If you're kind of like this, like try to spend time garnering other perspectives that will
Mhm.
expand your life.
Yeah, it's just like wherever you have sort of a natural gravitation, um, try like play with something that's totally not that.
Yeah,
Like play with the edges, play with the opposites,
yeah,
and do it with a sense of experimentation and fun. It's not like, oh, you should be the opposite. It's not like you're wrong where you're at, but it's like poking around
yeah.
and playing. It's like, what would it look like if you had a completely different lifestyle?
Mm-hmm. Oh, dude, I gotta tell you a story. You're gonna love this because it really is about wisdom. Like ultimately, that's I think what that's a perfect recipe for wisdom. You're gonna come away with some wisdom out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you'll love this. So I was at I was at Landmark the weekend before last, and we talked about that. And Landmark, it's like a shopping center, and there's a bunch of furniture stores, and there's also an abortion clinic. And so it's not just for abortions, but women's health clinic that performs abortions on Saturdays from like 8 to noon. And so I was going on Saturday, and I noticed there was all these protesters out there, and then there was also a group of volunteers that were in like yellow shirts that said patient escort, and mostly women that were volunteering to escort these patients. And so I stopped on the way in and I just chatted with them, and I was like, oh, hey, that's really cool that you're doing that. Like, that's, imagine this isn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I was like, give me, tell me an email address and I'd love to come help. And so, so last Saturday I went out there and donned one of the shirts, and from like 7:30 a.m. to about 10:30, I was out there. And dude, you're gonna love this. This is fucking great. So I just, because I've been telling this story most this week, but I think you can appreciate it even more. So I'm not, but like I'm pro-choice, but I actually don't really give a shit all that much, in a sense. Like I don't even think that should be up to me. Like, again, I kind of just like, yeah, sure, if it's your body, you do that. So in a sense, that's my pro-choice stance, but it's not even that I think being pro-life is okay too. It's just that if you want to do that, you do it, whatever. And I can also see where like aborting a baby at like 8.5 months, like I can see that's kind of shitty. Like I don't think, again. So that the point is that I went out there because I wanted to experience that. I wanted to see what was going on. And I'm also just a big fan of bringing those two sides together. I'm also a fan of how can I create that third option between these two people, between these two sides? Because I noticed they weren't talking to each other, obviously. And so I went out there in the morning, and I made a point every time there was. So what would happen is a car would drive up, and they were going to the abortion clinic, because usually it was you have to go with two people. So it was like a guy and a girl, whatever. You could kind of tell. So they'd drive up, and then the protesters would kind of like follow them a little bit, and then like when they got out of the car, they'd be like, hey, can I talk to you about you may not want to do this, here's a pamphlet you can adopt, blah blah blah. And actually most of them are really sweet, to be honest. Like most of the protesters are just like really well-meaning people and wonderful. And so I just started chatting them up. I was just like, hey, what's going on, like, and to honestly, to really give them credit, like they were far more friendly to us than we were to them. The pro-choice volunteers were not like, we're kind of like, yeah, man, whatever. And then the Christians were like, hey guys, like, you want some coffee? Like, let's hang out, whatever. So I just engaged them. I was like, yeah, what's up? And I ended up meeting a couple guys that were in the Navy. One of them had the same job as me when I was in the Navy. One of them went to the Naval Academy, just like me, and we had some mutual friends. I was sitting chatting with them, and then one of the guys comes over, and he's like, hey man, take some of these cards in case the guys want to adopt instead, and take some of our pamphlets. And I was like, nah, man, like, that's not my job. I'm escorting people, like, and he's like, well, yeah, but don't you believe this? And I'm like, it's not really what about what I believe, man. Like, that's not what I do. I'm here escorting the patients. You're here giving them pamphlets. That's what our jobs are. And I was like, listen, man, this is how I see it. It's like a play. We're like, do you notice what happens here? The cars come, we go like rush the cars. I try to help them get to the clinic. You try to give them the pamphlets and stop them. And then what happens after they go in the clinic? We come back and talk about your kids again. And then the same thing happens. Like, this is like a play. We're in the green room right now. And I'm the actor. I'm Captain Hook and you're Robin Hood. Or Robin, fucking Peter Pan, whatever.
Peter Pan.
So,
yeah.
It's like, this is my job. Like, and this is your job. And it's totally cool. But let's just hang out and be friends in the green room, because there's no reason to get all hostile about my views. That's just not, I don't even give a shit about my views. It's not that like I'm also attached to them. I just came out here to play this role. I said, maybe in a couple weeks I'll come be on your team just for a week, just to see how it is, because it's fun. Totally fucking, like, there's totally fucking with these people. And it was interesting. And some of them kind of got it. They were like, oh, cool, whatever. And, we'd sit there and just chat in between the cars coming. The cars would come and I go, oh, and I would actually, it was so much fun because, our job is, if the protesters don't go up to the cars, that's perfect, because then they just go up to the clinic. Everything's fine. But I'd actually be like, if I saw a car coming, I'd grab one of the protesters and I'd be like, hey, man, check it out. You don't miss it. It's a car. Let's go. Like the two of us, let's go together, because we're like good and evil. That's what we do. We go together, And it was such a like it was just so fucking funny, and so the non-dual like person in me was just so excited by this because here I was like really getting to act out these opposites and in such a light way that didn't matter at all. And again,
Right.
I at the end of it, I had like I had just kind of written down the names of the protesters because I wanted to get to know them because I'm going to go back this Saturday, and and it was just like so cool to just like get it. And I came away from that experience with so much wisdom, like with so much like understanding, and like I just felt like a more expanded person because I actually listened to them. I would hear their views. I would listen to like their concerns. Like, what is someone who's pro-life, like, what do they really care about? Like, and I really got that. Like they really, and actually, one of them was talking about this, and I said, I kind of get where you're coming from because the truth is there's only like right now with the law saying, abortion is okay until the child's born. Like there's a millisecond difference between cold-blooded murder, which everybody would agree with, and abortion, right? Like before the baby pokes out, it's, abortion, and after he pokes out, it's murder. Like no one would consider like a newborn baby that's crying and then just killing him. That would be like an atrocity. But doing it 2 seconds before would be abortion. And so I kind of was like, like I can see your perspective on this. Like it, again, I don't think we should change the law. I don't think the law, but I get it, and it made me just a better person to be there and to listen to these guys and talk to them. Aside from the whole non-dual, life is a play thing, which was hilarious. But I just wanted to throw that. I just like, I feel like that's such a geeky philosophy moment that I don't think a lot of people could appreciate, but I was so excited about it. I was like, oh, this is so good that like, I was like, yeah, man, like you're Batman. I'm like Bane, like without Bane, like Batman would have just stayed depressed the whole movie. Like Bane took him out of his depression and threw him down in a well and found his strength again. Like you need Bane, like you can't have Bane without Batman. And so it was just really cool to see that. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, and it's like beautiful process work as well. It's like like inhabiting the role and knowing that you're inhabiting the role.
Yeah.
It's like giving everyone a voice.
Yeah.
You should bring a friend to be on the other side, and every once in a while switch roles.
I know, right? Yeah, and it would probably piss off the pro-choice people more than it would piss off the Christians, which is kind of a bummer
like it.
In a way, like because I think Christians have kind of, or these guys they've accumulated the wisdom that if they're cordial and nice, that it's just going to be better for business, Whereas like pro-choice people are kind of fueled more by that like angst.
Sounds like the pro-choice. They're more defensive.
Yeah, they're more defensive. They're more like I think they're more victims. Maybe you could even say they're less willing to come to the table and be nice to these people.
Yeah,
like they came over and brought us water. Honestly, like this guy named Mike used to be a same job as me in the Navy. A guy named Adam went to the Naval Academy just like me, and so we had some mutual friends. And they really listened to me. Like, yeah, I know they had an agenda. I know they wanted to convert me to pro-life, but they did it in a way where it was like, wow, if only we could actually listen to each other, and have these views. And like, so, because the problem is, it's the same thing with like, I think what's going on right now with Islamic, the threat of Islamic fundamentalism and immigration and stuff like that. And it's like, I think that we're so divided on the issue. We're so polarized that we can't actually look at that. There's a real danger of more terrorists coming in, but we're so divided on it in a way that everybody's either all one side or all another side that we can't just like come in the middle and then be like, yeah, it's either Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders. It's just either this huge divide, and it just doesn't work. And so I always feel like, okay, if I can be the person that like can just like respect the shit out of somebody because they have a different view than me, that's the work right there. It was good.
Yeah. And yet earlier on in this conversation, you were saying that you weren't a good listener.
Well,
or that you weren't listening.
I had to cultivate those skills. I don't know it didn't feel like a listening skill that I was doing there. Well, I didn't say I was listening a lot either. I mean, I was actually really entertaining. Like they would, some of the pro-choice people come up to me afterwards. They were like, "Dude, that was great. You had like you had a mob of protesters around you listening, and they weren't harassing the people going to the clinic. Like we should just put you out there, and, like entertain them, and then they won't. They're too busy talking to you. You know.
Just go out, have fun with the protesters, lead relating games for the
Right.
protesters,
Yeah.
and like the pro-choice people, they'll be happy because you're distracting them,
Yeah.
and you'll just be relating with people.
Yeah. It was great. It was
They'll
great.
be too busy, like people would be too busy relating
Yeah.
to be complaining about what other people are doing.
Yeah. 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 I want to have like a script. That's my goal for next time. Like I want to have it be where like we kind of have like a routine, like good cop, bad cop worked out or something.
Uh-huh.
You know, because I'm like, and like I will actually like take turns speaking. I'll be like, we'll walk up and they'll be like, "Don't abort the baby," and I'm like, "I'm here to save you. I'm here to take you and guide you if you'd like that help." And they go, "You don't like this guy? He's a villain." And like I just want them to be like more like I want to like script it out.
Have an epic battle between you.
You know, and there was one guy that you would love this too as a coach. There's one guy, his name's Manuel, and you know he was a protester. His thing was he had a sign with an ambulance outside the abortion clinic because one time somebody had to go to the hospital, so they took a picture and they say, okay, someone died here, you don't want to do it, and of course, you know, she didn't die, whatever, and so I noticed that he was kind of shy. Like I noticed that like the cars would come and he'd be like. He'd have that kind of approach anxiety. And so I would actually be like, come on, dude, like you got this, like you could do this. Like, let's go together. Like I'll go with you and and like, it's just so funny. Like the guys would walk off and he'd be like, I have like, dude, you got this, man. You get him next time, man. Like you got this. And but he really, it was an actual, it wasn't like sarcasm. Like he was with me, like he was my friend. It wasn't like, yeah, I mean, I was laughing also, but at the same time, it was like, he actually he actually felt like I gave a shit about him, you know? And I actually did want to see him get out of his comfort zone and expand who he could be in the face of the opportunity to talk to someone new that's a stranger that may hate him. And it was just so beautiful. It was so cool. I wish you could come, man. You should find something like that in San Francisco and see if there's like an opportunity because it's really trippy to like be like a non-dual protester.
It does remind me of a time, and it wasn't quite non-dual, but it was like a little bit of like bringing the ridiculous to a protest. Um, let's see, what was the protest? Like, it's like a Midwest protest. I think this was in the Castro with like them on either side of the street, but with signs, sort of like chanting, yelling at each other. And I just happened to be part of an improv event. It was the No Pants subway
I
ride.
like where this is going. Oh yeah, I
So
heard about that. Yeah, the No Pants Summer Ride. Yeah.
yeah, so this like crowd of people without pants, just like walking like in between like this protest, just like brought this air of the ridiculousness to it. It's just like you guys are like free to be like yelling at each other or like saying it's like, oh, we're right, we're right. It's like we're just walking through without pants. Don't mind us.
Yeah, that's so great. Where was that?
This was in the Castro
Where's
a
that?
couple
Oh,
of
San
years ago.
Francisco?
Hmm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the San Francisco lingo. Castro, get it. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm aware of two different kinds of listening from what you were describing. And I think the kind of listening that people are afraid of, like where it's like they contract, like they think that if they're listening to someone, if they're understanding that position, if they're like going into that mode of like, okay, I'm going to totally get your world and understand where you're coming from, a lot of people equate that to agreeing with that person,
Yeah,
to taking on that worldview. They think that if they hear something, that's what they believe.
yeah,
That's constricted, that's egoic, that's dangerous, which is like what has them not want to listen to other people. Like people don't want to hear what Trump is saying because it's just like
yeah,
bad. I just gotta close my ears and just listen to Bernie and
yeah,
just agree with everything that he says.
yeah,
There's another kind of listening though where it's just like you're getting their world. You're listening with a spaciousness and expansiveness. Like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. It's like actually like that makes sense that you see it that way.
yeah,
It really requires like a strong sense of self and a spaciousness to listen with that quality. And I think that's wisdom. I
Yeah.
think that's a mark of wisdom is being able to listen that way
Hmm.
and be able to like just hear everyone and even like agree with them in their world. Like, oh yeah, yeah, cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's beautiful. I'm like, I'm glad you're doing that. Good
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Totally.
there's like parts of you that like totally agree and identify with that.
Hmm.
You become more expansive from listening to people that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I was hanging out later that day with a friend who used to be like very, very hardcore Christian, grew up in Texas. And she was saying that, one of the breakthroughs for her was then she realized that um, post leaving the church, that, you know, like proselytizing is very justified when you really get the worldview of someone. Like, we were talking about, so she was saying, she was telling the story about some Mormons that approached her while she was on the phone. And so she was sitting there on the phone. They're like, "Hey, can we tell you about this?" And she was almost like, she was like, "No, what the hell, man? Like, come on, I'm on the phone. Like, that's rude."
Hmm.
And then I told her, I was like, "Well, I was like, it wouldn't be rude if you actually got that they think that they're saving you from going to hell for eternity. It's just a phone call. You know, what I mean, like that's where they're coming from. And when you really
Uh-huh.
get that, like, if you really believe in this stuff, of course you'd be evangelizing. Like, what? I mean, it's like having a vaccine to a disease that everybody has, like, or a cure. Of course I'd be out giving it out. Like, why wouldn't I? And so I totally get why someone is like knocking on my door. I'm like, hey, like, can I tell you about Jesus? Like, I get it, and so right on, I mean, so it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they actually want to help.
Yeah, no, totally. Just like the abortion protesters, like they actually want to prevent what they consider murder.
Hmm.
I get that. I would want to prevent murder too. You
Yeah,
know, I mean, I've
yeah.
recently become a vegan because I think murdering animals is a bad idea. That's something I'm going to speak about with them next week and see how they feel about that. But it's like I get it, and it really, like, it did occur to me. It took me a while, but it did occur to me that it's killing animals. The same reason I wouldn't eat my dog,
Hmm.
because I like my dog. It's cute. So that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, and coming from that place, in a way, like we're all right.
Yeah.
It's like we all mean well.
Totally.
Everyone means well.
Yeah. We just have these beliefs, and we're entitled to have our beliefs.
Yeah.
And I made an interesting analogy for a friend of mine who was struggling with this because he felt like he was afraid to take on other people's beliefs, so he wouldn't even like consider it, and he wouldn't enter the conversation. And I said, well, I think about it as like a house. So, you know, if people come to your door and knock on your door, which is a good metaphor, of course, um, you know, you can let them into your house and let them sit down in your living room, and you can bring some food from the kitchen and hang out with them. But you get the choice to, like, whether they then come and sleep with you in bed. Like, you don't have to let them in the bedroom, but, like,
Uh-huh.
don't leave them out in the cold. Like, bring them in and hang out with them in the living room. The living room being kind of a place where, like, all views are welcome. But you don't have to automatically take them up to your bedroom.
Yeah.
And that really worked for him. He was like, "Oh, I can see that. How there's these kind of like these levels,
Hmm.
and there's level where you can really bring people in a way that's loving and very considerate of them,
Yeah.
but you're not automatically joining their club.
Yeah. It's like you're not sort of like taking them on as a mentor just because they knocked on your door.
Right? Yeah, yeah, totally. But you can give them some cookies.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
it can still be nice to them.
Yeah,
And you can still like you can it's like you can expand your house
yeah,
to include them.
yeah,
I think that's wisdom.
yeah.
So like every time someone knocks on your door, your house just got larger.
Nice. You build a little porch or something.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The people that I find that I can't really engage as much with, and I've seen this as like there seems to be kind of a line here because I do enjoy these kind of like passionate conversations with religious people. It's sort of a hobby of mine, and I can't like, when there's the justification of that's true because it's in the Bible, and that's a tough one. That's like a conversation stopper right there because there's nowhere to go there. Like I can't, like, if they believe that it's true because it's written in the Bible,
Mhm.
um, it's just I get it, and
Yeah, that's
there's just nowhere for us to go with that one.
tricky for me
You
too.
know?
to map that over to like spiral dynamics, when they're pre-rational
Yeah.
and they think that they're like trans-rational,
Uh-huh.
um, that's hard to interact with for me
Yeah.
because that's actually almost like where the best way to interact with them would be from a place of overpowering or manipulating them.
Yeah, or like you have to just like that's fascinating. Yeah. There is and I don't know if there's I just don't hold out any hope that they're going to change. That
Hmm.
way I'm like, oh. But there is. I mean, you could actually prove to somebody that you're like, okay, so I get that you believe that because it's in the Bible. Well, look at the other stuff in the Bible. Do you believe that you should stone your wife because she's, whatever on Saturdays? I mean, you could kind of go to that example, but I just haven't had any success with that yet.
Yeah, well, if they're pre-rational, like rational might not be within their range.
Right.
Sort of like using sort of like the Zen approach of like eventually like the fool's folly, whatever. I forget the quote there. Like allow them to follow through. Just like be yes to everything. It's like, oh, well, that means this. Oh, that means this. Like, oh, everything that's written in the Bible is true. So this is also true then,
Hmm.
which can be a really fun game to play
Yeah.
for yourself.
Yeah. I have to
And
beef up
if
my
they're at a
Bible
rational
knowledge to
level,
be able to play that game well.
yeah, you have to like really know the Bible.
Yeah,
It's sort of
that's the
like play the
problem.
Bible game. It's like, ooh, the Bible game has started.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some friends that are really good at that.
Uh-huh. Um, but yeah, if they're pre-rational, they will just like they will shut down.
Yeah.
Like they won't listen to following logical streams of thoughts. Like, no, no, this is true.
Yeah.
It'll just like come back to that. It'll come back to what they want to believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, hard for me to deal with that as well.
Yeah. 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 I was also trying to. This is the other thing I was trying to communicate to the pro life people last Saturday, and I couldn't. It didn't really work out. But I wanted to. I was trying to address this idea that like, why is it that everybody that's pro life is also religious? Like, like why isn't there like it? Like I was trying to like point to the trends. And like, isn't it kind of funny? Like, isn't it interesting that
Hmm.
everybody like it's like you say that it's your belief, but it just happened. Like, what came is a chicken or egg thing. Like, like
Yeah. It's
and
like atheists are against murder.
right,
Why aren't there atheists on your side?
yeah. Like, why is it so divided by what religion you're a part of? You know, and I couldn't really get that one through, but that
Yeah.
was interesting to me. That's because that's like my other reasoning for it. It's like, listen, I don't. When you say because I think it's murder, I don't believe you. I actually what I think you are what I think you're doing is I think you're justifying it based on the fact that you want to believe in a certain dogma that you've ascribed to, you
Hmm.
know, and it's not that I don't even know what you believe, but I'm saying that you're not in touch with what you really believe in a
I'm saying that
sense.
you don't know what you believe.
Right. Like I'm saying you're still parroting something else and justifying it. It's kind of like when Jon Stewart confronts politicians, or he did that on, I don't know if you saw this YouTube thing. It's on Crossfire. He was on Crossfire like 10 something years ago.
Hmm.
And he just confronted both of these guys who were, I don't know if you ever watched Crossfire when it was on, but
Yep.
it was a debate show where they had a Republican and a Democrat debate guy, and then they'd bring on two other people that are Republicans and Democrats, and they just debate issues. But it was more like theater than true debate because the Democrat was always going to fight for the Democratic side, and the Republican was always going to fight for the Republican side. So it wasn't. It was like more like pro wrestling than it was like an actual, So, so Jon Stewart just came on and just trashed him. He was like, you guys aren't doing debate here. Actually, what you're doing is hurting America, and we
Hmm.
need stuff like this to actually debate the issues. But all you're doing is dividing everything up to right and left, and it doesn't
Hmm.
help. And so that's kind of my thing. It's like I see that these guys believe a certain thing, but they're not being honest. They're not coming from a place of what do I actually believe, and then does it subscribe or not to a certain religion. They're coming at it from the religion first and then justifying it.
Yeah.
So
It's sort of like, what has my tribe decided that we believe,
yeah,
rather than having like taking individual stands and having individual opinions.
right.
Yeah, I love the wrestling metaphor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dude, That is one of my
That's
favorite
the
clips.
level of
You
ridiculousness.
have to look it up. Jon Stewart Crossfire. It is. I
Hmm.
mean, he trashes them. It is like a. It is just, and they canceled the show that season because of that. Honestly, like that, you can look it up.
Wow.
That's like, he came on and just trashed them, and so good because he, there was one guy, Tucker Carlson, who's actually still around as like a pundit, whatever, and he wears a bow tie, and at the time he was like 35. So Jon Stewart just gets him. He's like, because of course Tucker Carlson, Republican, right, wearing the bow tie. It's just theater. And Jon
Hmm.
Stewart's like, how? He's trying to explain to his theater. He's like, how old are you? He's like 35. He's like, and you wear a bow tie. Like that's. He's like, he's like, those aren't easy to tie. But he weaves in the comedy in a way that just smacks them in the. It's so good. It's so
Uh-huh.
good. And then, yeah, it's classic.
We need more of that in our politics. Like at some point, Jon Stewart became like the much more like authoritative, truthful route, like access to politics than anyone else.
Yeah, yeah. I I I have this thought probably daily now because there's so much politics in the news. I just have this thought of like, could Jon Stewart really just run for president, and how would that work? Like it just occurs to me like it's just like a broken record. I just keep thinking about like how, gosh, and then I'm like, no, I get it. John wants to have a family. He wants to live a life. Like it's not, like I get that. I get the reasons he doesn't want to do it. Probably like it would be
Hmm.
hell, and it's very selfish of me to want him to be president. Like, but it's just like fuck, man. Like that's. It's just so good. Like, and I mean, look at how could you? I think it's pretty much certain that he would win. Like, just look what Trump did. Donald Trump is just as much of a celebrity as Jon Stewart. I mean, there's nothing that Jon Stewart could like. Trump's doing that. Like, every reason that Trump is being successful, Jon Stewart would be tenfold. You know, I just think, wow, it'd be amazing. Anyways,
I would vote for
maybe we should end on that.
him. Jon Stewart for president.
I mean, yeah, it's just I'm like, God, it just makes so much sense. It's like, oh, he's retiring. Maybe he's gonna do. No, it's not even close. Um,
Maybe it's the beginning of a long path into politics for
yeah,
him.
I don't know. I mean, he's still young. He's probably in his 50s. He could definitely do it.
Hmm.
Most
Yeah.
politicians are like 60s, I guess. But anyways,
Yeah, it's like how do we I think a big I love the emphasis so far in this conversation on like listening. Listening in such a way that like everyone's world is being integrated, gotten. How do we get more of that to be happening in the world? How do we spread this?
well, I mean, there's the be the change way. That's happening. Hopefully, to the extent that it's happening. Um, Yeah, I'd say probably taking off our pants and walking through protests and demonstrations.
That'll get everyone
I
listening
think,
more.
well, in a way, I do think though, in all honesty, that is, I didn't think about this before I said that, but the trend I see is humor. To be
Yeah.
honest, the trend I see, people said, I heard somebody say the other day, now we used to listen to politicians and laugh at comedians. Now we listen to comedians and laugh at politicians.
Yeah.
And that's just like a fact. That's not even like a joke. That's actually what's happening. And
Yeah.
so, you know, we're making humor because humor is the way to, like, humor has the most social lubrication. You can pretty much say anything if you're funny or a musician and singing a song about it. And so we're using that medium to bring up these issues, or to, like, to talk about the things we need to talk about. And that's why that comedians are so powerful today, because we know that they are the ones that are gonna be able to, like, go the deepest into the stuff that we really need to talk about.
Yeah.
And look at John Oliver. I mean, dude, John Oliver is like,
Yeah.
I mean, he is.
I saw his show on Trump, I think yesterday.
Yeah, everybody saw his show. I mean, really, it was like
That was epic.
52 of your friends have shared this on Facebook. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. All right. But it was like, I mean, he is as passionate an activist about this stuff as any politician, probably more so. But he does it in a way that he's so masterfully combined the humor and stuff that he's learned from Jon Stewart and these guys, and that is, I mean, he's making a huge impact, you know, and you couldn't do the same thing if you took out the humor. I mean, and if you could show me an example of someone that's done that. I mean, maybe you could say there's some public intellectuals out there that have done that, maybe a Sam Harris kind of character, or like other people that are just going with the message, but the humor is going to reach more people all the time.
Yeah, it really like it's a kind of like wake up call, shake up, raising of consciousness that actually like hits the mass media.
Yeah,
It's like it reaches so many people. Um, it's not as like thorough and loving as like some of the like the relational work that we've been like enveloped by,
hmm
but that's like covering just like a tiny portion of people are like gradually discovering that, and that's like just very slowly growing. But comedians are definitely like one of the I don't know, like one of the people who are like really bringing greater consciousness to the masses.
yeah,
Like Louis C.K. is one of my heroes,
totally.
especially like in the relational realm. Like like the humor that he brings around like relationships and like emotions, and like some of his stuff around racism and sexism and privilege is just
hmm
so spot on.
Yeah,
He brings such powerful distinctions in ways that are like so hilarious.
yeah,
Like people get it.
yeah, yeah. And I think, and I don't know if this, I think this has always been the case, but I'm really, that is the thing that I look for in comedians is like, where are they operating from?
Hmm.
It's really simple. Like I know within the first minute where a comedian is coming from in terms of, let's just call it the stages of consciousness. Since we're
Hmm.
talking integral stuff. Like that's, you can kind of tell, and it's not. It's like they could. And Louis C.K. is a sneaky one because he's, there's some guys like a George Carlin is like okay, it's pretty apparent where he's coming from. Like there's like a, he brings that, he wears that on his sleeve kind of. But like Louis C.K. it does it in a very subtle way, very subtle way, But you get it, and you're like, yeah. And we talk sort of about technology and how phones and it's hilarious. It's just so good. He has such a humility about him that it's really sneaky. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, nice.
Whew.
Have you ever done stand up comedy?
I haven't.
I think you should totally do it. I've done it a few times, and I have a bunch of jokes that I write out, and um, I just love it because I like being on stage and having attention, anyways. But I think you would love it because it would. I think you have something to say, and it would also like be a fun way to get more wisdom by
I
coming out.
think
Yeah,
Yeah, I think a next stage for me is actually like doing a bit more like speaking.
yeah,
And part of it is like how much humor and like how much almost stand-up comedy could I be bringing into the speaking when I'm leading events and such. I'm already playful when I'm
yeah,
leading,
yeah, yeah.
but speaking, then maybe I'll like dare to do stand-up comedy.
Dude, I think if you started a practice of going to comedy open mics and really like saw improvement in that area, I think that would be like, it would complement the skills you already have in a way that would be like unstoppable. It'd be amazing.
Ooh, I might get into that.
Yes, excellent.
Excellent.
um,
Give me the mic.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think stand-up comedy too is also an interesting thing when it comes. It circles back around to this idea of self-awareness, and then playing to the strengths and weaknesses, and then also understanding what you're um, inclined to be. Because if I know what people, if I can get how I'm coming off, then I can juxtapose that in my comedy.
Hmm.
Just like how do you have the perfect Halloween costume? Well, you juxtapose who you are.
Yeah,
So if you're a big burly guy and you wear a dress, it's hilarious.
yeah.
And if
It's
like
like
you're, yeah,
me. I'll be Mike Tyson for Halloween.
yeah, like that's hilarious. Yeah, exactly. And so but it all comes back to knowing yourself and seeing how you're actually being in the world, which is quite a job, because knowing yourself is quite a job.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew.
Yeah, man.
Feels like things are starting to settle.
Yeah, it's funny with time. I don't know. It's been about an hour 20,
Oh
but I
wow.
feel like sometimes I'm like, huh, like, is it, like I've done so many conversations that are just about an hour that sometimes I find myself like naturally, like, going to this arc that wraps in an hour somehow, but,
Hmm.
um,
It didn't happen this
didn't
time.
happen.
It went
It
over.
was good. It was good. We got
I
got
sort
there.
of, yeah, I forgot to check the time.
Yeah.